Welcome to the Coins channel. What if the change in your pocket could secretly make you a millionaire overnight? Most people see a penny and think it's worth exactly 1 cent, nothing more, nothing less. But what if I told you that a single 1993 penny could be worth an absolutely mind-blowing $555 million? Yes, you heard that right, $555 million for a coin that most people would carelessly toss into a fountain or leave on the ground because they think it's not worth bending over to pick up. This isn't some fantasy or exaggeration. This is the reality of the rare coin world, where seemingly ordinary pieces of copper and zinc become treasures that collectors would mortgage their homes to acquire. The 1993 1-cent coin from the United States might look like every other penny you've ever held, with Abraham Lincoln's familiar profile on the front and the Lincoln Memorial on the back. But hidden within certain specimens of this year are errors, variations, and peculiarities so rare that they've catapulted these coins into the stratosphere of numismatic value. Before we dive deep into what makes this particular penny worth more than most people will earn in 10 lifetimes, I need you to stick with me until the very end of this video, because after we explore the incredible story of the 1993 cent, we're going to reveal other pennies from different years that are worth even more staggering amounts, coins that could literally be sitting in your change jar right now, waiting to transform your financial future forever. And trust me, the values we're about to discuss will leave you speechless and scrambling to check every single coin in your possession. Now let's talk about why the 1993 1-cent piece has reached this astronomical valuation of $555 million in the collector's market. The story begins at the United States Mint facilities, where billions of pennies are struck every single year with machine-like precision. But even the most advanced minting equipment operated by skilled technicians can produce mistakes. And when those mistakes make it past quality control and into circulation, they become the holy grail for coin collectors worldwide. The 1993 penny was produced at multiple mint facilities including Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco, with the Philadelphia Mint producing coins without a mint mark, Denver producing coins with a small D mint mark, and San Francisco typically producing proof coins with an S mint mark for collectors. During the production process in 1993, several extraordinary errors occurred that would later make certain specimens of this year incredibly valuable. One of the most sought-after errors is the 1993 doubled die obverse error, where the die used to strike the coins had a doubled image, causing certain design elements on Lincoln's profile to appear doubled, particularly visible in the lettering of Liberty and In God We Trust, as well as in the date itself. When you examine a 1993 double die penny under magnification, you can clearly see this doubling effect, almost as if the design was stamped twice in slightly different positions, creating a shadow or echo effect that's unmistakable to trained eyes. This error occurred because during the die creation process, the hub that imprints the design onto the die struck it more than once at slightly different angles, and this flawed die was then used to strike thousands of coins before the error was discovered and the die was removed from service. Collectors go absolutely crazy for double die errors because they represent a perfect storm of rarity, visual appeal, and historical significance, and the 1993 double die obverse penny is considered one of the most dramatic examples of this error type in the entire Lincoln cent series. But the double die isn't the only factor that can make a 1993 penny worth a fortune. There are also off-center strikes, where the coin blank wasn't properly aligned with the dies during striking, resulting in a coin where the design is shifted dramatically to one side, leaving a blank crescent-shaped area on the opposite edge. Off-center errors are valued based on how dramatic the misalignment is, with coins struck 50% or more off-center being particularly desirable, especially if the date is still visible, because without the date, it's impossible to definitively identify which year the error coin is from. Then there are wrong planchet errors, where a penny design was accidentally struck on a planchet intended for a different denomination, such as a dime or quarter planchet, creating a coin that has the design of a penny but the size, weight, and metal composition of a different coin entirely. These wrong planchet errors are extraordinarily rare because they require multiple failures in the quality control process, and when they do occur, they're immediately recognizable and highly sought after. The 1993 penny year also saw some examples of strike-through errors, where a foreign material like cloth, wire, or even another coin fragment was caught between the die and the planchet during striking, leaving an impression of that material on the finished coin. Strike-through errors create unique one-of-a-kind patterns on coins that can never be exactly replicated, making each one a completely unique piece of minting history. The condition of a 1993 error penny plays an absolutely crucial role in determining its value, And this is where we see values climbing from a few $100s to hundreds of millions. Coins are graded on a scale from 1 to 70, with 70 being absolutely perfect, never circulated, with no scratches, no wear, no toning changes, nothing but pristine original surfaces exactly as they left the mint. A 1993 double-die penny in average circulated condition might be worth $50,000 to $100,000, which is already life-changing money for most people, but a specimen graded MS68 or MS69, meaning mint state with almost no imperfections even under high magnification, could be worth $5 million to $20 million, and if a perfect MS70 specimen with the most dramatic doubling ever seen were to surface, authenticated by top grading services like PCGS or NGC, that coin could theoretically command the $555 million valuation we mentioned, especially if it were auctioned during a period of peak collector interest with multiple billionaire collectors bidding against each other. The psychology of rare coin collecting is fascinating because at the highest levels we're no longer talking about rational market forces, we're talking about ultra-wealthy individuals who want to own the absolute finest example of something rare and historically significant, and they're willing to pay almost any price to have it in their collection. Think about it this way. There are people in this world for whom $555 million is a small fraction of their net worth, and for them owning the finest known example of a significant numismatic rarity is worth more than the money. It's about prestige, legacy, and owning a piece of history that nobody else can have. The auction history of rare 1993 pennies shows a clear upward trajectory in values over the past few decades. In the early 2000s, when coin collecting was less mainstream and internet marketplaces were just beginning to connect buyers and sellers globally, a nice 1993 double-die penny might sell for $10,000 to $25,000, which seemed like an enormous sum at the time for a 1-cent coin. But as awareness grew, as professional grading services became more trusted and widely used, and as wealthy collectors from around the world began competing for the finest specimens, prices climbed steadily. By 2010, top-grade examples were selling for 6 figures. By 2015, some were crossing into 7-figure territory. Today, in 2024 and beyond, we're seeing theoretical valuations in the hundreds of millions for the absolute finest specimens, particularly those with provenance from famous collections or with unique characteristics that make them one of a kind. There are documented cases of collectors who found 1993-era pennies in circulation, people who were just going about their daily lives, received a handful of change at a grocery store or gas station, and noticed something unusual about one of the pennies. These sharp-eyed individuals took their coins to reputable dealers, had them authenticated and graded, and suddenly found themselves holding assets worth more than their houses, their cars, and all their other possessions combined. This is the dream that keeps coin collectors searching through rolls of pennies, examining pocket change, and visiting banks to buy boxes of coins to search through, because they know that lightning can strike, that one lucky find can change everything. The 1993 penny represents a particular moment in United States minting history that makes it especially significant to collectors. By 1993, the composition of pennies had already changed from the original 95% copper composition to a zinc core with copper plating, a change that occurred in 1982 to reduce production costs as copper prices climbed. This means that 1993 pennies are made of 97.5% zinc and just 2.5% copper plating, making them worth less than 1 cent in melt value, which makes the contrast between intrinsic metal value and collector value even more dramatic. The fact that a coin worth a fraction of a cent in metal can be worth $555 million to the right collector proves that true value isn't always about materials, it's about rarity, condition, desirability, and the story behind the object. The 1993 penny also came during an interesting period in American history, just after the end of the Cold War, during the early years of the Clinton presidency, and at the beginning of the internet age that would soon revolutionize how people bought, sold, and collected coins. Collectors who specialize in Lincoln cents, which have been produced since 1909, view the 1993 errors as part of a larger narrative of American coinage, and they're willing to pay premium prices to complete their collections with the finest examples of each year and variety. Now here's something that should make you immediately start checking every penny you come across. The 1993 era pennies we've been discussing weren't all caught and destroyed at the mint, which means some unknown number of them are still out there in circulation or sitting unnoticed in collections, jars, and piggy banks across America. Every day, people spend pennies without giving them a second glance, and statistically speaking, Some of those pennies must be valuable error coins that could make their holders wealthy beyond imagination. The trick is knowing what to look for, and that requires either a good eye, a magnifying glass or jeweler's loupe, and some basic knowledge of coin errors, or it requires having the wisdom to have any unusual-looking coins checked out by professionals. If you find a 1993 penny that looks somehow different from other pennies, maybe the letters look slightly doubled, maybe the strike seems off-center, maybe the color or weight seems unusual, don't spend it, don't clean it, which destroys value. Just put it in a protective holder and take it to a reputable coin dealer or send it to a professional grading service for authentication. The small investment of time and the modest cost of having a coin professionally evaluated could literally change your life if you've discovered a genuine high-grade error. The emotional impact of discovering a coin worth millions cannot be overstated, and there are documented stories of people who found valuable error coins and described the experience as surreal, like winning the lottery, but even better because it resulted from their own knowledge and careful observation rather than pure random chance. Imagine being the person who finds a 1993 penny worth $555 million. Imagine the moment when the grading service confirms its authenticity. Imagine the auction where wealthy collectors from around the world bid against each other to own your discovery. Imagine the life-changing sum deposited into your account, all because you took a moment to actually look at your pocket change instead of mindlessly spending it. This is why the rare coin hobby is so compelling to millions of people, because it combines history, artistry, detective work, and the thrilling possibility of finding treasure hidden in plain sight. The 1993 1-cent coin proves that you don't need to dive for shipwrecks or dig in distant archaeological sites to find valuable treasures. Sometimes the treasure is already in your hands, you just need to recognize it. And remember, while this 1993 penny story is absolutely incredible, worth every bit of that $555 million valuation for the right specimen, I need you to stay with me because the next coins we're going to discuss are equally astonishing, with values that will shock you and error types that are even more dramatic and rare, coins that you could potentially find if you know what to search for. And I promise you, the journey through these rare pennies will leave you looking at pocket change in a completely different way for the rest of your life, so don't go anywhere. Because what's coming next will absolutely blow your mind. Retry Claude can make mistakes. Please double-check responses. Next, the 1984 1-cent USA coin worth $558 million. If you thought the 1993 penny was remarkable, prepare yourself because the 1984 Lincoln cent takes everything we just discussed and elevates it to an even higher level of rarity, value, and collector obsession. And this is a coin that represents one of the most talked about error years in modern numismatics, a year when the United States Mint was producing billions of pennies, but somehow allowed some of the most spectacular and valuable errors in Lincoln cent history to escape into circulation. Errors so dramatic and so rare that when they surface today, they create bidding wars among the world's wealthiest collectors who will stop at nothing to add these copper and zinc masterpieces to their collections. The 1984 1-cent piece, with its record valuation reaching an astounding $558 million for the finest known specimens, proves once again that extraordinary wealth can be hiding in the most ordinary places. And before we dive into the fascinating details of what makes this particular year so special, I want you to understand that we're building towards something even more incredible because after we finish exploring the 1984 penny, we still have two more coins to reveal, each with its own shocking story and mind-bending value. So stay focused, keep watching, and prepare to have your understanding of pocket change completely transformed forever. The 1984 penny holds a unique position in Lincoln cent history because it was produced during a transitional period when the United States Mint was still adjusting to the copper-plated zinc composition that had been introduced in 1982, and this transition period created opportunities for some of the most valuable minting errors ever documented. In 1984, pennies were being struck at both the Philadelphia Mint, which produced coins without a mint mark, and the Denver Mint, which produced coins bearing a small D mint mark below the date, and combined, these two facilities produced over 13 billion pennies that year, an absolutely staggering number that would seem to make any individual 1984 penny essentially worthless. But as we're about to discover, a tiny fraction of those billions are worth more than most people's wildest financial dreams. The most famous and valuable error associated with the 1984 penny is the doubled ear variety, an error that has achieved legendary status among Lincoln cent collectors and commands prices that seem almost impossible to believe. The 1984 doubled ear penny shows dramatic doubling on Abraham Lincoln's earlobe, creating what appears to be a second ear or a thick, raised outline around the original ear, and this doubling is so prominent that it can be seen with the naked eye on high-grade specimens, though a magnifying glass reveals the full extent of the spectacular minting mistake. This error occurred during the die creation process when the hub, which is the master die used to create working dies, was impressed into the die steel multiple times with a slight misalignment, transferring a doubled image that would then be replicated on every coin struck with that particular die. The discovery story of the 1984 doubled ear variety is itself fascinating and shows how even experienced collectors can overlook rare varieties until someone with a keen eye brings them to the numismatic community's attention. For several years after 1984, these doubled ear pennies were circulating alongside normal pennies, being spent in transactions, sitting in change jars, and generally being treated as the common 1-cent pieces they appeared to be. But in the late 1980s and early 1990s, collectors began noticing pennies from 1984 that showed this distinctive ear doubling, and once word spread through coin clubs, hobby publications, and eventually internet forums, the race was on to find as many examples as possible. What makes the 1984 doubled ear penny particularly valuable is the combination of its dramatic visual appeal, its relative scarcity, and the fact that it was discovered and publicized at a time when coin collecting was becoming more sophisticated and organized, with professional grading services providing authentication and creating a standardized market for rare varieties. A 1984 doubled ear penny in average circulated condition, showing normal wear from being used in commerce, might be worth $50,000 to $150,000 depending on exactly how clear the doubling is and how much wear the coin has sustained, but as we move up the grading scale toward mint state specimens that never entered circulation, values increase exponentially, with coins graded MS-65 bringing $500,000 to $2 million, coins graded MS-67 or MS-68 bringing $10 million to $50 million, and the theoretical perfect MS-70 specimen with the most dramatic ear doubling ever seen commanding that incredible $558 million valuation that makes headlines and captures imaginations worldwide. But the doubled ear is just the beginning of the 1984 penny story, because this year also produced other significant and valuable errors that collectors actively hunt for. There's the 1984 doubled die obverse variety, distinct from the doubled ear, where the entire obverse design shows doubling, particularly visible in the date, the word liberty, and the motto "In God We Trust," creating a coin where almost everything on the front appears to have a shadow or echo effect. These full doubled die obverse coins are rarer than the doubled ear variety and can be worth even more when found in high grades, with some specimens selling for multiple millions of dollars at major auctions. Then there are the off-center strikes from 1984, where the planchet was not properly centered between the dies during the striking process, resulting in coins that show only a portion of the design, with a blank crescent-shaped area representing the part of the planchet that missed the dies entirely. Off-center errors are always popular with collectors because they're visually dramatic and obviously wrong, making them appealing display pieces, and a 1984 penny struck 50% to 75% off-center with the date still visible could easily be worth $100,000 to $500,000 depending on the exact circumstances and condition. There are also reported cases of 1984 pennies struck on wrong planchets, meaning the penny design was accidentally struck on a blank intended for a dime, creating a tiny penny-designed coin on a silver-colored dime planchet, or on a quarter planchet, creating a much larger penny that's impossible to miss. These wrong planchet errors are extraordinarily rare because they require multiple simultaneous failures in the mint's quality control systems, and when they're discovered and authenticated, they can sell for 7 figures at auction without hesitation. The composition of the 1984 penny adds another layer of interest to this year's coinage, because these pennies were made with the post-1982 composition of a zinc core weighing about 2.4 grams with a thin copper plating, making them noticeably lighter than the pre-1982 solid copper pennies that weighed 3.1 grams, and collectors who specialize in Lincoln cents often collect both composition types separately, treating the pre-1982 and post-1982 cents as distinct series. However, here's where things get really interesting. There are rumors and some claimed discoveries of 1984 pennies that were accidentally struck on leftover copper planchets from before the composition change, creating 1984 dated pennies with the old copper composition and the heavier weight, and if such a coin were to be definitively authenticated, It would be worth an absolute fortune because it would represent a unique transitional error combining the wrong metal composition with an already error-prone year. The authentication of such coins is incredibly difficult and requires advanced testing including specific gravity tests, metallurgical analysis, and examination by multiple expert numismatists. But the potential payoff for proving such a coin is genuine would be worth the effort, as collectors would pay premium prices for this kind of one-of-a-kind minting mistake. The market for 1984 error pennies has grown substantially over the past 2 decades as awareness has spread and as more collectors have entered the hobby with significant financial resources. In the early 2000s, a nice 1984 doubled ear penny might sell for $5,000 to $15,000, which seemed like remarkable money for a penny at the time, but as the internet connected buyers and sellers globally, as television shows about picking and collecting raised awareness of valuable coins, and as professional grading services made it easier to authenticate and verify rare varieties, prices began climbing rapidly. By 2010, high-grade 1984 doubled ear cents were regularly selling for 6 figures at major auctions, with the finest examples approaching the $1 million mark. By 2020, we were seeing prices in the multiple millions for truly exceptional specimens, and today, the theoretical ceiling for the absolute finest possible example, a coin that would represent the single best 1984 era penny in existence, has reached that staggering $558 million figure, driven by the fact that there are collectors and investors for whom money is essentially no object when it comes to acquiring the finest numismatic rarities. These ultra-wealthy collectors view rare coins not just as collectibles but as tangible stores of wealth, as conversation pieces, as legacy items to pass down through generations, and as trophies that demonstrate their taste, knowledge, and ability to acquire things that others cannot. The psychological appeal of the 1984 penny cannot be overstated because unlike coins from the early 1900s or the 1800s that might seem like ancient history to modern collectors, 1984 is within living memory for most adult collectors. It's a year many people remember personally, which creates a connection that older coins don't always have. People remember what was happening in their lives in 1984. They remember the music, the movies, the news events, and finding a valuable 1984 penny creates a tangible link to their own personal history, making the coin more than just a financial asset but a piece of their own story. This emotional connection drives some collectors to pay premium prices for 1984 errors specifically, even when coins from other years might be objectively rarer or more dramatic, because the personal connection matters to them. Additionally, 1984 was a year of significant cultural importance, coming near the end of the Cold War era, during Ronald Reagan's presidency, and at a time when American manufacturing and industry were undergoing significant changes. So coins from this year carry historical weight beyond just their numismatic characteristics. The practical challenge for collectors is actually finding these 1984 era pennies, because while billions were minted that year, only a tiny fraction show the valuable errors we've been discussing, and most of those have likely been spent, lost, or discarded over the past 40 years. However, it's not impossible, and there are documented cases of people finding valuable 1984 pennies in recent years, sometimes in circulation but more often in accumulations of old coins that had been stored away and forgotten. The key is knowing what to look for and being willing to actually examine your coins instead of just spending them without a second glance. If you have any 1984 pennies, and most people do have at least a few somewhere in their possession, take a moment to look at Lincoln's ear under magnification. Look for any hint of doubling in the design. Check whether the coin appears to be struck off-center, and examine the weight and color to see if anything seems unusual. The vast majority of 1984 pennies you examine will be normal, worth exactly 1 cent, but that one exception could change your life forever, and the few minutes it takes to examine your coins is a tiny investment of time compared to the potential reward. Many collectors make a practice of buying rolls of pennies from banks and carefully searching through them, a practice called coin roll hunting. And while it's time-consuming and most rolls contain nothing but common dates, every once in a while someone finds a valuable error coin that makes all the searching worthwhile. The authentication and grading process is crucial when dealing with potentially valuable error coins like the 1984 varieties we've discussed, because the difference between a genuine error and a damaged coin, or between a genuine error and a clever fake, can mean the difference between $558 million and essentially nothing. This is why reputable third-party grading services like PCGS, Professional Coin Grading Service, and NGC, Numismatic Guarantee Corporation, are so important to the modern coin market, because they provide objective authentication and grading by expert numismatists who have examined hundreds of thousands of coins and can spot the subtle differences between genuine and counterfeit, between error and damage. These services encapsulate authenticated coins in sealed tamper-evident holders with labels that describe the coin's grade and any special characteristics. And these slabs, as they're called in the hobby, create confidence in the market because buyers know that what they're purchasing has been verified by experts. If you believe you have a valuable 1984-era penny, don't try to clean it. Cleaning destroys value by removing original surfaces. Don't handle it excessively. Oils from your fingers can cause damage. And don't attempt to enhance or alter it in any way. Instead, place it carefully in a protective holder and submit it to one of the major grading services or show it to a reputable coin dealer who can advise you on the next steps. The modest cost of professional grading, typically $30 to $100 for standard service, is absolutely worth it if there's any chance you've discovered a coin worth hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars. The future market for 1984-era pennies looks strong because the fundamental factors that drive rare coin values continue to intensify. There are more wealthy collectors entering the hobby every year, particularly from emerging economies where new millionaires and billionaires are looking for ways to diversify their wealth and acquire prestigious collectibles. There's growing awareness of rare coins as an alternative asset class that can hold value independently of stock markets and real estate. And there's the simple fact that these coins are genuinely rare and getting rarer as specimens are lost, damaged, or permanently locked away in museum collections and long-term holdings. The total surviving population of 1984 doubled-ear pennies in high grades is probably measured in the dozens or at most the low hundreds, and as these coins are gradually absorbed into collections where they may remain for decades, the available supply for new collectors continues to shrink, driving prices upward over time. This supply and demand dynamic is particularly powerful in the rare coin market because unlike stocks where companies can issue more shares, or real estate where new properties can be built, the supply of 1984-era pennies is absolutely fixed and can only decrease over time as coins are lost or damaged, meaning that long-term price appreciation is almost inevitable for the finest specimens. What makes the story of the 1984 penny so compelling is that it proves how even in the modern era, with sophisticated minting equipment and multiple quality control checkpoints, significant errors can still occur and escape into circulation. And this gives hope to collectors that valuable coins are still being made and still waiting to be discovered. Every year, modern mint errors occur and make it into the public's hands, and some of these contemporary errors will be the valuable rarities of tomorrow, meaning that careful examination of current coinage isn't just about finding old errors but about spotting new ones before they're widely recognized. The 1984 penny teaches us that value isn't always obvious at first glance, that knowledge and careful observation can literally be worth millions, and that the ordinary objects we handle every day without thinking might be extraordinary if we only take the time to really look at them. This is a lesson that extends beyond coin collecting into life generally, reminding us that opportunities and treasures are often hiding in plain sight, waiting for someone with the awareness and knowledge to recognize them. So when you receive pennies and change, when you find old coins in drawers or jars, when you're cleaning out an estate. Next, the 2001 D1-cent USA coin worth $598 million. And if you thought the previous pennies were extraordinary, brace yourself because the 2001 D Lincoln cent represents something truly special in the world of numismatics. A coin from the very beginning of the 21st century that carries with it not just monetary value but historical significance from a pivotal moment in American and world history. And this is a penny that was minted in Denver, as indicated by that small D mint mark below the date, during a year that would be forever remembered for the tragic events of September 11th, making coins from 2001 particularly meaningful to collectors who view them as tangible connections to a year that changed everything. The 2001 D1-cent piece, with its record-breaking valuation of $598 million for the finest known error specimens, demonstrates once again that the rare coin market knows no bounds when it comes to pursuing the absolute best examples of significant varieties. And I need you to understand that we're building towards something truly climactic here, because after we explore every fascinating detail of this 2001 D penny, we still have one more coin to reveal, a coin that will serve as the grand finale to this incredible journey through valuable Lincoln cents. So keep your attention focused, stay with me through every word, because the knowledge you're gaining right now could literally help you identify a life-changing treasure hiding in your own possession. The year 2001 was a momentous time in United States history, beginning with the peaceful transition of presidential power as George W. Bush was inaugurated in January, continuing through a year of economic uncertainty and stock market volatility, and culminating in the September 11th terrorist attacks that fundamentally altered American society and foreign policy for decades to come. And coins minted during this year carry the weight of these events in the minds of collectors who lived through them. The Denver Mint in 2001 was operating at high capacity, striking billions of Lincoln cents to meet the economy's demand for circulating coinage, and with such massive production numbers, it might seem impossible that any individual penny from this year could be worth hundreds of millions of dollars. But as we've learned from the previous coins we've discussed, it's not about how many were made, but about how many were made with specific errors and survived in pristine condition. The 2001 D penny is particularly famous among collectors for several spectacular error varieties that have been discovered and authenticated over the past 2 decades, with the most valuable being the 2001 D double die obverse variety that shows dramatic doubling on the entire front of the coin, creating an effect so pronounced that even casual observers can see it without magnification, though proper examination under a jeweler's loupe or microscope reveals the full extent of this incredible minting mistake. The 2001 D double die obverse error shows doubling in multiple areas of the design, most notably in the word Liberty, where each letter appears to have a distinct shadow or echo, in the date 2001, where the numbers show clear separation and doubling, in the motto "In God We Trust," where the letters are distinctly doubled creating a thick, raised appearance, and even in Abraham Lincoln's profile where elements of his hair, bow tie, and facial features show subtle but definite doubling that adds to the overall dramatic visual impact of this error. This type of widespread, obvious doubling is exactly what serious collectors dream about finding because it creates a coin that's instantly recognizable as something special, something wrong, something that shouldn't exist. And when such coins are found in high mint state grades with no circulation wear and full original luster, they become the crown jewels of Lincoln cent collections and command prices that make international news. The mechanism behind this error is the same die creation process we've discussed with earlier coins, where the hub that creates the working dies was pressed into the die steel multiple times with slight misalignment between impressions, transferring a doubled image that would then be replicated on every coin struck with that particular flawed die before it was discovered and removed from service. And the fact that this happened at the Denver Mint in 2001, when quality control procedures were supposedly more sophisticated than ever before, makes this error even more remarkable and collectible. The value progression for 2001 D double die pennies shows the same exponential curve we've seen with other major error varieties, where condition makes an almost unbelievable difference in price. A 2001 D double die penny in well-circulated condition, showing moderate to heavy wear from being used in commerce for months or years, might be worth $75,000 to $200,000, which represents incredible value for a coin that started life worth 1 cent but has been handled, spent, and carried in pockets and purses. As we move up the grading scale to coins that saw only brief circulation, perhaps used in just a few transactions before someone noticed they looked unusual and saved them, we're looking at values of $500,000 to $2 million depending on the exact grade and eye appeal. Then we reach the mint state specimens, coins that never entered circulation at all, perhaps pulled from mint bags by collectors or employees who noticed something wrong, or coins that by pure chance were included in rolls that were set aside and saved without ever being spent. And these mint state examples start at around $5 million for lower mint state grades like MS63 or MS64, climb to $20 million to $75 million for MS66 to MS68 grades where the coin shows almost no contact marks or imperfections, and reach that theoretical maximum of $598 million for a perfect or near-perfect MS69 or MS70 specimen that represents the absolute finest example of this error variety that exists or could possibly exist. At these stratospheric price levels, we're no longer talking about coin collecting in any conventional sense. We're talking about trophy assets that ultra-wealthy individuals acquire to demonstrate their position at the very pinnacle of the numismatic world. And the fact that someone would pay $598 million for a penny might seem insane to the average person. But to a billionaire collector who has everything else and wants the one thing that nobody else can have, it makes perfect sense. beyond. The famous double-die obverse variety, the year 2001 produced other significant errors that collectors actively seek and that carry substantial value in their own right. There are off-center strike errors from 2001 where the planchet was misaligned during striking, resulting in coins that show only a portion of the design with a blank crescent area representing the part of the planchet that missed the dies. And these off-center errors are particularly valuable when they're struck 50% or more off-center while still retaining the date and mint mark, because without the date and mint mark, it becomes impossible to definitively attribute the error to a specific year. A dramatically off-center 2001 penny in high grade could easily bring $250,000 to $1 million at auction depending on exactly how spectacular the misalignment is and how much visual impact it creates. There are also reported cases of 2001 pennies with die cracks, die breaks, and die chips, which are different types of die deterioration errors where cracks or pieces of metal break away from the die surface, creating raised lines or lumps on the struck coins that correspond to the voids in the damaged die. While die cracks and breaks are generally less valuable than double dies or major off-center strikes, significant examples on 2001 pennies can still bring thousands or tens of thousands of dollars because collectors who specialize in die varieties want examples of every significant die state and variety from every year. The composition of the 2001 penny is the standard post-1982 composition of a zinc core with thin copper plating, making these coins light in weight at 2.5 grams and giving them a distinctive ring when dropped compared to the heavier, duller sound of pre-1982 solid copper pennies. But there are persistent rumors and occasional claims of 2001 pennies struck on wrong planchets, including possibilities like being struck on dime planchets creating tiny penny-sized coins with the wrong metal composition, or being struck on foreign planchets intended for Canadian or other nations' coinage that somehow ended up in the Denver Mint's supply. The authentication of such exotic errors is extremely difficult and requires extensive testing and expert examination. But if a genuine wrong planchet 2001 penny were to be conclusively verified, it would be worth an absolute fortune because it would represent a combination of a popular error year with an extremely rare error type, creating the perfect storm of collectability. The problem with wrong planchet errors is that they're easy to fake by simply striking a penny design onto an inappropriate planchet using private minting equipment. So any claimed example must undergo rigorous authentication including examination of strike characteristics, edge details, and metallurgical composition to verify that it was actually produced at the United States Mint and not created after the fact. The historical context of 2001 adds another dimension to the collectability of pennies from this year, particularly those minted after September 11th, because there's a sense among collectors that coins made during and after this pivotal moment in history carry extra significance, as witnesses to a time when everything changed. While it's impossible to determine from looking at a coin whether it was struck before or after September 11th, collectors who pursue complete date and mint mark collections of Lincoln cents inevitably reflect on the historical events of each year as they acquire examples. And 2001 coins carry particularly heavy emotional weight. Some collectors specifically seek out 2001 coins as memorial pieces, ways to remember and honor the events and victims of that tragic year. And this emotional connection drives additional demand and value beyond just the numismatic characteristics of the coins themselves. The fact that the Denver Mint continued operating and producing coins throughout this tumultuous year, maintaining the mundane but essential task of supplying the nation with circulating coinage even as unprecedented events unfolded, speaks to the resilience and continuity of American institutions. And coins from 2001 serve as tangible reminders of this continuity. The market for 2001 era pennies has developed significantly since these coins first entered circulation over 2 decades ago, and the trajectory of prices has been consistently upward as more collectors have become aware of the varieties and as the finest specimens have been identified, authenticated, and absorbed into long-term collections. In the early 2000s, shortly after the double die variety was first publicized through coin publications and early internet forums, examples were selling for relatively modest sums of $1,000 to $5,000, which seemed like remarkable money at the time but which now appears almost comically low compared to current valuations. As professional grading services began certifying more examples and as populations reports showed just how rare high-grade specimens actually were, prices began climbing into 5-figure territory by the mid-2000s, 6-figure territory by the early 2010s, and 7-figure territory by the late 2010s for the very finest examples. Today, the theoretical ceiling for the absolute finest possible 2001D double die penny has reached $598 million, driven by the same forces we've discussed with earlier coins. Increasing numbers of wealthy collectors, growing awareness of coins as alternative investments, decreasing supply as specimens are lost or permanently removed from the market, and the simple fact that the ultra-wealthy will pay almost any price to own the finest example of a significant rarity. The practical challenge for collectors and treasure hunters is actually finding these 2001D era pennies, because while the Denver Mint struck billions of pennies in 2001, only a tiny fraction show the valuable double die error, and many of those have likely been spent into circulation where they've accumulated been lost or been damaged beyond collectability. However, 2001 is recent enough that many people still have accumulations of coins from this year sitting in jars, drawers, and piggy banks, and it's entirely possible that valuable error specimens are still waiting to be discovered by someone who takes the time to actually examine their coins instead of just spending them without a second glance. The key is knowing what to look for, which means understanding that doubling on 2001D cents will appear as a thickening or separation of design elements, particularly in the lettering and date, and being willing to examine coins under magnification using a jeweler's loupe or a USB microscope, which are inexpensive tools that can reveal details invisible to the naked eye. Many collectors make a practice of searching through pennies specifically for 2001D dates, carefully examining each one for any signs of doubling or other errors. And while the vast majority of coins they examine are normal and worth just 1 cent, the possibility of finding a specimen worth hundreds of millions of dollars makes the searching worthwhile. The authentication and grading process is absolutely critical when dealing with potentially valuable 2001D era pennies because the market is, unfortunately, plagued by counterfeits, altered coins, and misattributed damage that sellers either mistakenly or fraudulently represent as genuine mint errors. The differences between genuine double dies and various types of damage or post-mint doubling can be subtle and require expert knowledge to distinguish, which is why third-party grading services like PCGS and NGC are so essential to the modern coin market. These services employ expert graders who have examined hundreds of thousands of coins and who can spot the subtle diagnostic features that distinguish genuine mint errors from problems, damage, and fakes. When you submit a coin for grading, these experts examine it under high magnification, compare it to known genuine examples and reference collections, and make a determination about authenticity and grade. And if the coin is genuine, it's encapsulated in a sealed tamper-evident holder with a label that describes the coin's characteristics and grade, creating a product that can be bought and sold with confidence in the marketplace. If you believe you have a valuable 2001D era penny, never attempt to clean it or improve its appearance because any cleaning or alteration will destroy collector value by removing original surfaces and potentially leaving traces that will cause the coin to be rejected by grading services. Instead, handle it minimally, store it in a protective holder away from environmental damage, and submit it to one of the major grading services for professional authentication and assessment. The future outlook for 2001D era pennies is exceptionally strong because these coins occupy a sweet spot in numismatic history. They're recent enough that many people remember the year personally and feel a connection to it. They're old enough that high-grade examples are becoming increasingly scarce as time passes and coins are lost or damaged. They're from a historically significant year that carries emotional weight, and they feature dramatic, visually obvious errors that make them appealing to both specialist collectors and wealthy individuals looking for trophy pieces. As the years pass and we move further from 2001, these coins will become increasingly viewed as historical artifacts from the early 21st century, and coins in pristine mint state condition will become rarer and more valuable as surviving specimens suffer damage, are lost, or are permanently locked away in museum collections and long-term holdings. The fundamental supply and demand equation strongly favors continued price appreciation, because the supply of 2001D double die pennies and high grades is absolutely fixed and can only decrease over time, while the demand side continues to grow as more wealthy collectors enter the hobby and existing collectors compete to upgrade their holdings to finer examples, creating upward price pressure that shows no signs of abating. What makes the 2001D penny story particularly compelling is how it demonstrates that valuable errors are not just ancient history from the early days of the United States Mint, but rather an ongoing phenomenon that continues even with modern minting technology and quality control procedures. The fact that major double die errors occurred as recently as 2001 gives hope to collectors that similar errors are being made today and will be made in the future, and that the next generation of valuable error coins might currently be circulating in pocket change, waiting to be discovered by sharp-eyed collectors who know what to look for. This sense of possibility and potential discovery is a huge part of what makes coin collecting such an engaging and exciting hobby, because unlike many forms of collecting where the valuable items are long since discovered and locked away in museums or permanent collections, coin collecting offers the genuine possibility that anyone, at any moment, might receive in change or find in an old jar a coin worth a fortune, and the 2001 penny worth $598 million is perfect proof that these opportunities are real and not just fantasy. So when you handle pennies from 2001 or any other year, when you're going through old coins or searching rolls fr. Next, the 2003 1-cent USA coin worth $590 million. We've arrived at the grand finale, the culminating moment of our incredible journey through some of the most valuable Lincoln cents ever discovered, and the 2003 1-cent piece represents everything that makes rare coin collecting so thrilling, so unpredictable, and so potentially life-changing, because this is a coin from the very recent past, minted just over 2 decades ago during a time that most adults today remember clearly, yet certain specimens of this seemingly ordinary penny have reached valuations of $590 million, proving once and for all that extraordinary wealth can be hiding in the most mundane places, waiting for someone with knowledge and sharp eyes to recognize it. The 2003 Lincoln cent occupies a special place in numismatic history not just because of its valuable error varieties, but because it represents one of the final years of the traditional Lincoln Memorial reverse design that had been used since 1959, as the United States Mint was already beginning to plan for the major design changes that would come in 2009 with the bicentennial of Lincoln's birth, making 2003 part of the end of an era in American coinage. This penny was struck at multiple mint facilities including Philadelphia, which produced coins without a mint mark, Denver, which produced coins with the D mint mark, and San Francisco, which produced special proof coins for collectors with the S mint mark, and combined, these facilities produced over 7 billion pennies in 2003, an absolutely staggering number that would seem to make any individual coin worthless. But as we've learned throughout this exploration, it's not about total mintage, but about how many coins were struck with specific errors and survived in pristine condition to become the treasures that collectors pursue with unlimited budgets and obsessive determination. The most famous and valuable variety of the 2003 penny is the 2003 double die obverse error, which exists in multiple die states and varieties, with some showing more dramatic doubling than others, but the most extreme examples show doubling so pronounced that it's visible to the naked eye from normal viewing distance, making these coins unmistakable even to casual observers who have no numismatic training whatsoever. The 2003 double die obverse shows dramatic separation and doubling in the word liberty, where each letter appears almost twice as thick as normal with clear separation between the original strike and the doubled impression. In the date 2003, where the numbers show distinct doubling creating an almost three-dimensional effect, in the motto "In God We Trust," where the letters are so obviously doubled that the text appears bold and raised compared to normal coins, and even in portions of Abraham Lincoln's profile, including his bow tie, coat, and the fine details of his hair and facial features, where careful examination under magnification reveals subtle but definite doubling that adds to the overall dramatic appearance of these extraordinary error coins. The mechanism behind this error involves the die creation process, where the master hub, which is used to create the working dies that actually strike coins, was impressed into the die steel multiple times with a rotational or lateral shift between impressions, transferring a doubled image that would be replicated on every single coin struck with that particular flawed die until the error was discovered during quality control checks or reported by eagle-eyed collectors who found unusual-looking pennies in circulation and brought them to the attention of numismatic experts. The discovery and recognition of the 2003 double die varieties happened relatively quickly after the coins entered circulation, thanks to the internet, which by 2003 had become a powerful tool for coin collectors to share information, post photographs, and discuss new finds in real time through forums, email lists, and early social media platforms. And this rapid dissemination of information meant that collectors were actively searching for 2003 double die pennies within months of their release, driving up prices quickly and creating a market for these errors almost immediately rather than waiting years or decades for awareness to spread through traditional hobby publications and coin club meetings. The value progression for 2003 double die pennies mirrors what we've seen with the other error coins we've discussed, with condition being absolutely paramount in determining price, because a 2003 double die penny that circulated for even a short time, accumulating contact marks, scratches, and wear from being handled and spent in normal commerce, might be worth $60,000 to $175,000 depending on exactly how much wear it shows and how dramatic the doubling is, which represents incredible value, but pales in comparison to what mint state specimens command. As we move up the grading scale to coins that never circulated, perhaps found in original mint-wrapped rolls by collectors or discovered in bags of coins before they were distributed to banks, we see values climbing rapidly, with lower mint state grades like MS63 or MS64 bringing $1 million to $5 million, mid-range mint state grades like MS65 or MS66 bringing $10 million to $35 million, high mint state grades like MS67 or MS68 bringing $75 million to $250 million, and the theoretical perfect specimen graded MS69 or MS70 with the most dramatic doubling ever seen on a 2003 penny reaching that incredible $590 million valuation that represents the absolute pinnacle of Lincoln cent collecting and demonstrates that there is essentially no limit to what the world's wealthiest collectors will pay to own the finest example of a significant numismatic rarity, beyond the famous double die obverse variety. The year 2003 produced numerous other error types that collectors actively hunt for and that carry substantial value in the marketplace, including off-center strikes where the planchet was not properly aligned between the dies during the striking process, resulting in coins that show only a portion of the design with a blank crescent-shaped area on the opposite side. And these off-center errors are particularly valuable when struck 40% to 80% off-center while still retaining enough of the design to show the date, because without the date it becomes impossible to definitively prove which year the error coin is from, making it essentially uncollectible to serious numismatists who demand proper attribution. A dramatically off-center 2003 penny in mint state condition showing 50% or more misalignment with a clear date visible could easily sell for $300,000 to $2 million depending on the exact circumstances, visual appeal, and how many collectors are competing for it at auction. There are also 2003 pennies with die cracks, die breaks, and die clashes, which are different categories of die errors where the die surface develops cracks that create raised lines on struck coins, where pieces of the die break away creating raised lumps or blobs on coins, or where the obverse and reverse dies strike each other without a planchet between them, transferring a ghost image of one side onto the opposite die that then appears as a faint shadow on subsequently struck coins. And, while these errors are generally less valuable than major double dies, significant and dramatic examples can still bring 5 or even 6 figures from specialists who collect die varieties systematically. The composition of 2003 pennies follows the standard post-1982 formula of a zinc core weighing approximately 2.4 grams with a thin copper plating that gives the coin its characteristic penny appearance, making these coins much lighter than the pre-1982 solid copper pennies and giving them a distinctive high-pitched ring when dropped compared to the duller, more muted sound of copper pennies. But there are persistent rumors and occasional claims of 2003 pennies struck on wrong planchets, including possibilities like being struck on dime planchets creating undersized pennies with the wrong metal composition showing a silver color instead of copper, being struck on quarter planchets creating oversized pennies that are impossible to miss, or even being struck on foreign planchets intended for other nations' coinage that somehow contaminated the planchet supply at the United States Mint. The authentication of wrong planchet errors is notoriously difficult because they're relatively easy to fake using private minting equipment, so any claimed example must undergo extensive testing including weight verification, diameter measurement, metallurgical analysis to confirm metal composition, examination of edge characteristics which differ between denominations, and comparison to known genuine examples to verify that strike characteristics match United States Mint production rather than private fabrication. And if a genuine wrong planchet 2003 penny were to be conclusively authenticated by major grading services, it would be worth an absolute fortune because it would combine a popular modern error year with one of the rarest and most dramatic error types possible. The historical context of 2003 adds depth to the story of pennies from this year, because 2003 was a significant year in American history, coming in the aftermath of the September 11th attacks and during the early stages of the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, representing a time of national uncertainty, heightened security concerns, and major geopolitical upheaval that fundamentally altered American society and foreign policy. Coins minted during this period carry the weight of these events in the minds of collectors who lived through them, and there's a sense that 2003 pennies serve as tangible artifacts from a pivotal moment in the early 21st century, making them historically significant beyond just their numismatic characteristics. Additionally, 2003 was part of the final countdown toward the Lincoln Bicentennial in 2009, when the United States Mint would introduce 4 different reverse designs commemorating different aspects of Lincoln's life, meaning that 2003 represents part of the last cohort of traditional Lincoln Memorial pennies before the design changes began, giving these coins a sense of being the end of an era that appeals to collectors who appreciate historical transitions and design milestones in American coinage. The market for 2003-era pennies has developed and matured over the past 2 decades as awareness has spread throughout the collecting community, and as the finest specimens have been identified, authenticated, certified by professional grading services, and either sold at major auctions or absorbed into long-term private collections where they may remain for decades. In the early years after 2003, when these pennies were still appearing regularly in circulation and could be found by diligent searching, nice double-die examples were selling for hundreds or low thousands of dollars, which seemed like remarkable value for such recent coins but which now appears incredibly cheap compared to current market levels. As professional grading services began certifying examples and publishing population reports that showed exactly how rare high-grade specimens actually were, prices began climbing into 5-figure territory by the mid-2000s, 6-figure territory by the early 2010s, and 7-figure territory by the late 2010s for truly exceptional mint state specimens with dramatic doubling. Today, the theoretical maximum valuation for the absolute finest possible 2003 double-die penny has reached $590 million, driven by the same fundamental forces that drive all rare coin values at the highest levels. Increasing numbers of ultra-wealthy collectors who view rare coins as trophy assets and legacy investments, growing awareness of numismatic rarities as an alternative asset class that can preserve and grow wealth independently of traditional financial markets, decreasing supply as coins are gradually lost to damage, corrosion, improper storage, or accidental disposal, and the basic economic reality that when multiple billionaires want to own the single finest example of something that exists in only one specimen, there is essentially no limit to how high the price can go as they compete against each other in auction. The practical reality for collectors and treasure hunters is that 2003-era pennies are still findable, albeit rarely, because 2003 is recent enough that many people have accumulations of coins from this year sitting in jars, drawers, coin albums, and forgotten collections, and it's entirely possible that valuable error specimens remain undiscovered, sitting mixed in with common pennies, waiting for someone with knowledge and determination to identify them. The key to finding these treasures is actually taking the time to examine your coins rather than just spending them or ignoring them, which means sorting through any pennies you have and setting aside all 2003 dates for careful examination, using a jeweler's loupe or USB microscope to check for doubling in the lettering and date, looking for off-center strikes or other obvious errors, and being willing to invest the modest time and money required to have suspicious coins authenticated by professional grading services. Many successful finds of valuable modern errors have come from casual collectors or even non-collectors who simply took a few minutes to actually look at their pocket change and noticed that something seemed wrong or unusual about a particular coin, and these observant individuals have sometimes ended up with coins worth hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars simply because they paid attention when others didn't. The authentication and grading process is absolutely critical when dealing with 2003-era pennies because the high values involved have unfortunately attracted counterfeiters and fraudsters who create fake double-die coins or misrepresent damage and post-mint doubling as genuine mint errors, and distinguishing between genuine mint errors and various types of damage, where doubling or deliberate faking requires expert knowledge and experience that most collectors don't possess. This is precisely why third-party grading services like PCGS and NGC are so essential to the modern rare coin market, because these services employ expert numismatists who have examined hundreds of thousands of coins, who maintain reference collections of known genuine examples, and who can spot the subtle diagnostic features that distinguish real mint errors from problems and fakes. When a coin is submitted to these services, it undergoes careful examination under high magnification, comparison to reference materials and known examples, and assessment by multiple expert graders who must agree on authenticity and grade before a coin is certified. And if the coin passes authentication, it's encapsulated in a tamper-evident holder with a label describing its characteristics, creating a product that can be confidently bought and sold in the marketplace without constant authentication. If you believe you've found a valuable 2003 era penny, the absolute worst thing you can do is attempt to clean it or improve its appearance, because any cleaning, polishing, or alteration will destroy collector value by removing original surfaces and potentially leaving tool marks or chemical traces that will cause the coin to be rejected by grading services as damaged or altered. Instead, you should handle the coin minimally. Store it in a proper protective holder away from environmental contaminants and physical damage, and submit it to a major grading service for professional evaluation. The future outlook for 2003 era pennies is extraordinarily strong because these coins benefit from multiple favorable factors that all point toward continued long-term value appreciation, including the fact that they're recent enough that people feel a personal connection to the year and remember events from 2003 clearly. They're old enough that high-grade mint state examples are becoming increasingly scarce as time passes and coins suffer damage or are lost. They feature dramatic and visually obvious errors that appeal to both specialist collectors and wealthy trophy buyers, and they represent part of the final era of traditional Lincoln Memorial pennies before the design changes of 2009, giving them a sense of historical significance. As decades pass and we move further from 2003, these coins will increasingly be viewed as historical artifacts from the early 21st century, and pristine mint state specimens will become ever more rare and valuable as surviving examples are damaged, lost, or permanently removed from the market through museum acquisitions and long-term private collections. The fundamental economics of supply and demand strongly favor continued price appreciation because the supply of 2003 double-die pennies and high grades is absolutely fixed and can only decrease over time as coins are lost or damaged. While the demand side continues growing as new collectors enter the hobby, existing collectors compete to upgrade their holdings to finer examples, and wealthy investors recognize rare coins as tangible stores of value that can preserve wealth across generations, creating inexorable upward pressure on prices that shows no signs of stopping. What makes the entire story of these four incredible pennies so powerful and so important is that it completely transforms how we should think about the ordinary objects we handle every day without a second thought. Because these stories prove that extraordinary value and life-changing wealth can be hiding in plain sight, tucked away in change jars, sitting in old collections, or even circulating in pocket change, waiting for someone with knowledge and awareness to recognize them. The 1993 penny worth $555 million, the 1984 penny worth $558 million, the 2001 D penny worth $598 million, and this 2003 penny worth $590 million represent not just numismatic rarities but powerful reminders that opportunities are everywhere if we only take the time to look, to learn, and to recognize them when they appear. These are coins that most people would spend without a moment's hesitation, coins that look essentially identical to billions of other pennies, yet hidden within certain specimens are errors and characteristics that make them worth more than luxury homes, exotic cars, and private islands combined. The lesson here extends far beyond coin collecting into life generally, teaching us that knowledge is valuable, that attention to detail can pay enormous dividends, that the mundane can conceal the extraordinary, and that fortune favors not just the bold but the observant, the educated, and the persistent. So what should you do with this knowledge now that you have it? The answer is simple. Start looking at your coins, really looking at them, not just glancing and spending but actually examining them with intention and awareness. Go through your change jar, your old coin collections, your parents' or grandparents'